Oumuamua could not have been made by us because it was passing near us just for a few months, very quickly, faster than any rocket that we can launch. That's why we couldn't really chase it when it was receding away from us.
Joe Rogan is widely known as the man who is always ready to talk about aliens and UFOs, and he might have just given us clues on some recent UFO sightings. The 55-year-old who hosts the Joe Rogan Experience has had several people share their thoughts on his podcast. This mostly results in hot discussions where truths about UFOs are revealed, and Joe Rogan just did that in a discussion. What did he say about recent UFO sightings? Are aliens truly coming to our world? Join us as we explore how Joe Rogan finally breaks the silence on recent UFO sightings. Number 10. Military encounters with aliens. A lot of news has been released about the military encountering aliens, but when the Pentagon released some information that confirmed an alien sighting and encounters with the US Navy, it became the center of discussion for UFO enthusiasts worldwide. And as if that were not enough, Joe Rogan was able to get a Navy pilot named David Fravor on the show, and his response sent the entire scientific community into a frenzy. This is a Navy pilot said to have encountered the so-called Tic Tac UFO while he was still serving in the US Navy. Joe Rogan asked him about these encounters, and from his feedback, it seems aliens are quite real. During the podcast, David Fravor even talked about how underwater UFOs exist.
So when you hear all the reports of, hey, we've seen these things since World War II that would come out of the water and fly, if you have a technology like this, as long as the object is sealed where you're not going to get water inside of it, there's nothing that says you can't do that.
He noted that there have been some strange, unidentified aerial objects that have been seen since World War II. Fravor also said that the object has super advanced technology that enabled it to come out of the water and fly. He even added that he's had several people reach out to him and send emails to him telling him they can relate to his encounter and that they have seen similar occurrences too. Fravor also gave his point of view about humanity being the only civilization living in the universe. He said,
I look up and go, well, if we're the only ones around everything I'm looking at, it's a pretty sad place. It's a pretty lonely universe.
Number 9. Joe Rogan and the man who got abducted by aliens. While some of Joe Rogan's episodes have been about those who have sighted aliens, some episodes have also been about people who have interacted with these aliens at one point in their lives. One such person is Travis Walton, the man who claims to have been abducted by aliens. Travis Walton's story is one unbelievable and scary narrative, because imagine being abducted by aliens in 1975 while working as a lumberjack. This was a story that largely became a media sensation and eventually led to the 1993 movie Fire in the Sky. Travis Walton gave an account of how he woke up lying on his back on a raised table.
I was lying on my back on a raised table. There was a light above me. It was not real bright. It was not so bright that I couldn't, see the outline of the fixture. But I guess it's a pretty typical description nowadays. Very large eyes, hairless. 2 eyes, nose, mouth. I didn't see them speak, or no change in the expressions. And to me, that in the face of all the screaming and the fear that I was projecting, their lack of reaction probably just added to my panic. When I tell this story and try to relate to people, I'm trying to communicate what I experienced and how utterly, utterly traumatic that was, and how it was so devastating. I was, on the verge of catatonic for weeks after it happened. But I don't want to relate this story in order to inspire fear.
He said he woke up to short and bold creatures watching him before some people took him away and knocked him out after putting a mask over his face. Walton narrated his story extensively and even added that it was traumatic and devastating. It must have seemed like an adventurous nightmare to him, because he also narrated how the aliens observed him like some experiment with no words or change in their expressions. Number 8. James Fox and Jacques Valet on a UFO sighting in Zimbabwe. In another episode of Joe Rogan's podcast, people came to talk about the events of a UFO sighting that occurred in Zimbabwe. This led Jacques Valet, a ufologist, and James Fox, a director, to come help give their thoughts about the UFO sighting that happened at a school in Zimbabwe on September 16, 1994. This is a story that also features in his documentary, The Phenomenon.
There's no way that a mass landing with the sheer volume of eyewitness testimony at a school in broad daylight could happen and the whole world not know about it.
It's considered one of the largest mass sightings of UFOs in history, as 62 young students playing during a morning recess talked about seeing a strange silver craft that came down from the sky and landed in a nearby field by a clump of trees. This is one sighting that cannot be denied in any way, and James Fox himself mentioned that while on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. The alien sighting was such a wild one because it wasn't seen by just one or two people, and the students who were present at the time of the sighting also explained how one or more humanoid creatures dressed in what seemed like skin-tight black and making odd movements approached them. James Fox noted that this sighting was the exact clue that one needed to pursue and confirm that aliens are actually real.
You've got all these children saying what they saw on camera after it happened, and then you see them 20 years later, and then we go to Africa and we meet with the headmistress, or she was a teacher at the time. We meet with other witnesses, we go to the landing site, we talk to people at the school. That case is absolutely, and it was witnessed by lots of other people in and around the area for several days before it chose a school to land.
Some of the students said the creatures seemed to communicate with them telepathically, transmitting a message of concern about the damage human beings were doing to the Earth. Number 7, Brian Greene says aliens might not be interested in humans and Earth. While James Fox and Jacques Valet were giving key points explaining how real these aliens are, a physicist named Brian Greene, on the other hand, did not agree while he was on the show with Joe Rogan. Greene noted in his theory that aliens haven't visited us, and there is a reason why.
But the answer to that could be quite straightforward. Nobody out there cares about us.
Why would Greene think that aliens probably do not care about us? If they didn't care, what are we going to call the sighting made in Zimbabwe? Greene is not ready to listen to anything else, as he states in his theory that the entire race of humanity is ill-developed. He also said that our planet is so young on the cosmic scene that there is nothing fascinating enough that can be used to lure the aliens in from outer space or any type of advanced civilization we might have around us. He supported his theory as he argued it to Joe Rogan, saying that objects like the Oumuamua that are spotted in outer space have their natural explanation for why they're present in the final frontier.
For why there can be other life out there, and yet they don't hang out around planet Earth, just the way we don't hang around an anthill to try to have a conversation with, what's going on inside that particular structure.
Number 6, George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell on Area 51. With all the hot takes and encounters that have been talked about on the Joe Rogan podcast, the mind keeps exploring for more. And as a result, Joe Rogan found himself talking about Area 51 in one of his episodes. Area 51 is one name that is highly surrounded by several rumors, thoughts, and perceptions. It is a military base that has spawned more conspiracy theories than perhaps any other military facility in the world. Because of the extreme confidentiality of Area 51, several speculations started to make rounds, saying that the United States government has an alien in Area 51 as well. Joe Rogan, being known for who he is, invited guests like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell on his podcast to talk about Area 51. George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell joined Joe Rogan, and George Knapp gave some secrets about Area 51, which he heard from a source.
Now, this guy actually is someone that you've had reference to on your show. Remember Annie Jacobson, her book about Area 51?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same guy, but the story that he told me was different than what he told her. He said that they eventually told me that they had a live alien out there.
George Knapp was the American investigative journalist who initially gave a report on Bob Lazar's claims to have worked on alien tech and Area 51. Although Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp have not been able to provide concrete evidence that explains their encounters, it is majorly fascinating to hear about things like this going on in our world and to hear stories from those that have witnessed them. And at one point during the show, they also talked about some situations that have made the story of aliens seem like it's all fiction. Jeremy Corbell, alongside Joe Rogan and George Knapp, also gave their complaints about people who decide to make things up about several phenomena, and people ridiculously believe them.
And the more fanciful and ridiculous, the better, unfortunately. People pay more to hear that and consume it.
Number 6, Tim Poole going deep on UFO encounters. With an episode like the one where Joe Rogan and his guests talked about what type of activities are going on behind the walls of Area 51, it is common for several thoughts to come up and as a result can be joked about in the show. This is something similar to what Joe Rogan did on his podcast with Tim Poole when they discuss facts on UFOs, but one particular question from Tim turned the entire conversation around. We don't know much about the types of activities that are being done in Area 51, apart from it being a military base, so letting our minds wander across different thoughts might be the best idea. This was what Tim Poole was probably doing when he asked Joe Rogan this question.
What if you've actually met a decoy person?
Could that be a possible thing, human decoys? Joe Rogan and Tim Poole even made some fun out of the questions, with Joe Rogan saying,
You couldn't tell the difference.
Maybe it's you, bro.
Maybe it's me. That's right.
And that's why you're able to work so.
Well, we can't say if it's true enough, but we have seen so many movies about this particular thing being done, so what if it's actually true? What if the person beside you at the moment is a decoy made by aliens stationed at Area 51? We don't know for sure. Number 5, physicist Harvey Loeb talks about interstellar objects. Based on these conversations about space and aliens existing among us, Joe Rogan did not only give his audience information based on only thoughts, sightings, and theories. Although these sightings of aliens are sometimes proved with the discovery of objects in space by astronomers, not everything is confirmed. To get the precise details about these discoveries and the truth behind interstellar objects, Joe Rogan reached out to physicist Harvey Loeb to talk about these interstellar objects.
So I'm a scientist, and I basically follow the evidence.
As a respected researcher who's largely known as the Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University, Harvey Loeb is the man who basically follows and works with the evidence he sees to discover the truth about some anomalies. One of the anomalies he talked about was in 2017 when he talked about Oumuamua, the interstellar object that once rocked the Earth with its discovery. Loeb conducted extensive research on the Oumuamua and in the end suggested that the interstellar object possibly has an artificial extraterrestrial origin. Although not all astronomers and scientists agreed with the Harvard expert's point of view, other scientists brought their ideas to the table, noting that the Oumuamua is nothing but a regular natural object shaped like a cigar. But not everyone left Loeb off the hook freely. Fellow researchers of Loeb's called him a disgrace to the world of science and astronomy for his view on the Oumuamua being an object owned by aliens. However, Loeb's point of view about the Oumuamua being a light sail built by an alien civilization was not bad after all, because when he talked to Joe Rogan, you would see the passion and dedication Loeb puts into his craft and research, which can be very infectious.
Think about a piece of paper, razor-thin piece of paper, tumbling in the wind.
Imagine it being Joe Rogan having a well-experienced astronomer on your show who's also talking about an alien object that came from outside the solar system and flew back before our technology could even catch up to it. Of course, you'd be silent just like the podcast's host, and Loeb can eventually turn out to be right with his theory, judging from his thoughts, research, and his conclusions.
Made by us, because it was passing near us just for a few months, very quickly, faster than any rocket that we can launch. That's why we couldn't really chase it when it was receding away from us.
Number 4, Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell discuss alien tech and human history. Whether the Oumuamua is a form of alien tech or is just a natural object, scientists and researchers like Harvey Loeb are just scientists that work with existing data, proofs, and theories. So he might not be the exact and correct person to ask about if alien tech actually exists. However, if you would like to find out some information about if alien tech is here on Earth and is being used, then we have to contact Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar is one man that largely talks about the interaction and association between the government and aliens. Lazar has claimed that he was once hired by the government to work at Area 51. While he was in service at Area 51, he noted how he had to work with a form of technology he had never seen before. This technology was later found to be a reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. He talked about his technology on Joe Rogan's podcast, where he said,
and it was in the demonstration of the reactor working where it caught my attention to where this is technology that doesn't even exist.
Still, Bob's existence is open to looking into because he's more of a controversial figure. Despite his claims about using alien technology at some point in his lifetime and working at Area 51, nobody seems to know who Bob Lazar is. The universities he allegedly said he went to and numerous workplaces have said that they have never heard of him, talk less of him working or studying with them. Regardless, alien enthusiasts and ufologists welcome him largely to talk about his experiences, and as a result, Bob has been able to gather a huge audience, mainly filled and supported by conspiracy theorists. One of the reasons why he was also on Rogan's podcast as well was because of his theories and claims on antimatter, anti-gravity waves, force fields, and alien involvement in history. He also talked about the things we often see and enacted in science fiction, saying they can be brought to reality.
All that stuff that's in science fiction becomes reality if you have a machine that can make gravity.
Also, he confirmed that this machine that can bring science fiction to reality was being produced and tested in a desert while he was there. Joe Rogan asked him how he felt after witnessing such an extreme level of practical science, and Bob said,
I mean, this was, now I knew we were on the absolute beyond, actually beyond the cutting edge of science.
If only Bob had concrete evidence to prove his stories, though. Number 3, Joe Rogan talks with Neil deGrasse Tyson on Stephen Hawking's warning. With several scientists and researchers talking about alien existence, multiple opinions have been given about what aliens are likely to do if they invade our planet. One of these opinions has come straight from the English theoretical physicist, the late Stephen Hawking. Hawking warned about the invasion of aliens, and he noted that any alien that visits our planet might have bad intentions toward humans. Rogan talked about this with astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Tyson gave his opinion about Stephen Hawking's warning, saying,
about the possibility of aliens enslaving us. Based on the reality that we've done that to ourselves.
This analysis made by Tyson was beyond shocking, judging from Hawking's level of reasoning and what led him to think this phenomenon could take place and why he issued the warning. Tyson analyzed Hawking's warning with Earth's history of colonialism that went down several decades ago and translated it to Hawking being scared about such an event repeating itself. At the same time, Tyson dished out his perspective, saying that extraterrestrials might not be like us. He explained this when he said,
it has been argued sociologically that the very act of wanting to colonize is self-limiting against successful colonization of the galaxy. Because to colonize the galaxy, it has to be done in an organized way. All right, you take this sector, I take this sector, but if I want territory and I want it now, and my kids want it now, I want that territory.
Well, we can't say that Hawking's warnings can be wrong, but Tyson's perspective on how violence cannot be used to colonize a galaxy make more sense. Even if it doesn't, Tyson has a way of telling his stories and giving the point of view in very dramatic ways that keep you glued while he speaks.
So it may be that the very kind of civilization that could peacefully colonize a galaxy is not the kind of civilization that would colonize the galaxy at all.
Number 2, Mike Baker talks about UFOs. When your podcast is often centered on the weird things that go on around us, like space, aliens, and the like, it is necessary to have people who know a couple of secrets about these phenomena on the podcast. One such person that Joe Rogan brought on the show and shocked a lot of people was a former CIA agent named Mike Baker. Hearing secrets being exposed by people who've served in the CIA is captivating enough, but when people like Mike Baker are on the Joe Rogan podcast, you should be assured to get most and if not all of the government's secrets. Baker talked about the present technologies owned by the Secret Service, and what caught our ears was when the former CIA agent said that
there's some stuff that needs to be kept off the radar screen because there is a tremendous competition going on right now, particularly for things like control of space.
After working as a covert field operations officer for over 20 years before moving to the private sector, you can definitely be assured that this man has a lot of secrets hidden in his suit. Joe Rogan took this as an opportunity to ask Baker about some of the questions that have not been answered about UFOs.
Do you think there are any credible stories, whether it's from Commander David Fravor, who saw that Tic Tac vehicle off the coast of San Diego, or whatever video?
Yeah. If I had to point to one, I would say Fravor.
Rogan's question to Mike Baker about Commander David's encounter with a UFO just cements the fact that there is a lot we are not aware of that goes on around us. You might say that in a way Mike Baker revealed some secrets about these discrete phenomena while at the same time he tried to cover some details. Baker noted that some of these encounters reported by people might not be all aliens, as some can be experimental craft. But at one point he also stated that some of these crafts spotted can be very hard to explain. He made these explanations in a very rambling response that was also hard to understand.
High possibility that that there's, yes, I do think that, but at the same time, then I also question sort of the way that's great. If some alien life force with amazing technology that we can't even fathom right now comes to visit us,
still, we don't know if he really does not really know about it or if he's playing mind tricks on us. Number 1, physicist Brian Cox talks about alien biology. It's not every time we get to see several Secret Service agents talk about aliens, but physicists like Brian Cox have talked about how alien biology is. Brian Cox is a professor of particle physics, and judging from the words he speaks on Joe Rogan's show, he is definitely the guy you would want to have as your high school science teacher.
It is not weak to not know. It's actually natural not to know.
You can say that Brian Cox is one of the brainiest kids of his time because he still displays it till now. How else would you understand alien biology if you weren't at Albert Einstein's level of genius? Brian can examine tough information that has proved hard to crack and turn it into the simplest terms for a layman to understand. This is what he did with alien biology. In his episode with Joe Rogan, he talked about life in space with every organism structure existing in it, right from actual creatures to organisms and bacteria that can be found on asteroids.
I think there must be, even in the solar system, I would not be surprised if we find microbes on Mars or on some of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn where there's liquid water.
Like Europa.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan also cannot do but ask Brian some brainy questions, but these questions didn't even move the physicist. Feels good to know that we have people to learn from about space and aliens, and they can gladly tell us all we need to know about them. That way we get to understand our planet a lot more. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.